we don't have all committee members here, so I wonder if I could ask for somebody to co-opt the Lord Mayor.
Happy to do that.
Oh, I think Alderman Barakis has got in. Oh, but now Councillor Harvey has returned, so we might unco-opt before that vote is taken. We don't have any apologies or leave of absence. Do we have any indications of conflict or pecuniary interest? No. Item 2 is committee acting as planning authority, and can I have somebody move that we seek to hear deputations? Thank you, Alderman Barakis. Is there any dissent to that? No dissent. Thank you. So that's carried. Item 2.1 is applications under the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme. 2.1.1 is 202 to 206 Macquarie Street. It's the only item that we have on the agenda. And I'll ask that we invite everybody from all people giving deputations. So we have everybody there. So if all who are providing deputations, if you wouldn't mind putting your mute buttons on at the moment. Thank you. But I shall call firstly Dr. Adam Forsyth, who's the principal of St Michael's College. So you have 5 minutes to, before we do that, I think given that a number of the people who provided representations brought up the issue of overshadowing and the lack of shadow diagrams, I'm going to ask Choi to provide the 3D modellings of the site with and without the building before we start the deputations. So Choi, can I hand over to you, and can you share your screen, please?
Thank you, Chair, Deputy Lord Mayor. I will share in a moment when Craig gives me the authorization. And okay, so now I'm sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, good. All right, so I'm just switch to a plan view, and I'll turn on the shadow in a moment. Okay, so let's start with winter. So what you see in green is existing, and red is the proposed building shadow. So let's start with 9 o'clock. That's 9 o'clock. We go to 10, 11, and 12. 1, 2 in the afternoon, 3, and 4. So just with there, I'll just turn on and off just to let you know, just give you understanding how much. So if I go back to say 2 o'clock. To noon. And 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'll do September.
Thank you.
So September, 9 o'clock with and without. $10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Oh, sorry, turn it on. So 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and noon. without, and with the proposal around 1 o'clock, three and 4. 5 o'clock. Okay.
Good, thanks, Joy. And the committee can ask questions of you later if we have any questions. So I'll hand over to Dr. Forsyth who's the principal of St Michael's Collegiate. And you have 5 minutes, and then the committee has a chance to ask questions of you.
Well, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. I just want to thank you, Aldermen and councillors, for this opportunity this afternoon. I really appreciate it. As per our written submission, we have significant concerns, and thank you, Quan, for showing that that modelling just now of the shadow. I mean, that I guess reinforces some of our concerns even further. Look, our primary concern, given the height and the bulk of this building, is just how much of our campus is going to be overlooked. This is a campus of a girls' school, 13 to 18-year-old young women, and that site is proximal to some really sensitive areas of our school that would be overlooked were it to proceed in its current form. Overlooking of classrooms, student lounge areas, and these are lounge areas where our year 9 and 10 students on one level and our year 11 and 12 students in another level directly beside the site enjoy lots of natural light coming to those spaces. These are lounge areas, eating areas where they just get to relax. They've got their lockers. Of concern, these are areas where they get changed in and out of their PE clothes and their uniform all through the day, depending on when their lessons are timetabled. It's going to directly overlook and into our main assembly hall, where we have assemblies, presentations, performances, chapel services. Also our dance studio, which has a major large window directly looking into the site, would be overlooked. Also our visual arts studios, and also a major concern, they're sort of the main learning areas and recreation areas internally, but in the outside areas, main courtyard areas and green spaces where students relax and play also would be overlooked significantly by the proposed development. As you just saw from the modelling that Quan presented, natural light would be blocked over a significant part of our campus. From what we just saw, our central courtyard would lose sun and all morning through till midday, which is a significant concern through much of the year. We've got some pretty sacred outside spaces which are going to be impacted here. Directly behind the site, we've got an outdoor chapel area, which is a very sacred part of our school. We've got some established gardens and trees in that area, which have been dedicated to other members of our community, long-serving staff and old girls. We've also got a memorial set of statues and pond for the Shoebridge children who were students at our school, and that area has a beautiful garden area associated with it, and that would be not only overlooked but heavily impacted by shade throughout the year, and the impact of that shade over many years on those very well established garden areas would be significant, would change the character of those spaces considerably. Obviously, we'd have concerns with the actual construction phase, the noise, the dust and the vibration involved. Our major exam areas are in our assembly hall and in the ground floor of the main classroom block, which is very close to there as well. And we also have concerns about the streetscape, the size and the bulk of the building, and the impact on the urban character along this side of Macquarie Street, where our school is. We think what's been proposed is quite inconsistent with what's surrounded on the streetscape on Macquarie Street. So I guess our concerns, as I've outlined there, I'm happy to sort of elaborate further or to ask any or to answer any questions as people as people have them.
Thanks, Dr. Forsyth. So do any of the elected members have questions? Councillor Coates and then Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Principal, Dr. Forsyth. Look, I just wanted to, first of all, ask you relatively broad, but just so it's on the record here, in terms of consultation that you've received from the proponents, would you say that you've received none, or you've received just the bare minimal sort of lip service, or they actually have, if you like, engaged with yourself as a neighbour?
Very early on, they engaged with us, I think just to sort of introduce themselves and give us some understanding of what they might look to do, but it was not very detailed at that stage. It was just sort of, you know, an introduction, and I think just trying to sort of get some input from us as to what, you know, might be on that site. So that was one meeting in October of 2019 that we had with them. That's the only one. We did have a brief phone conversation as well a little time after that, but no other meetings. And we were provided with the plans as they developed before a submission was made to council. So we were aware of what they intended for that site.
Yep. And I'll just very quick follow-up if I could, Chair. Just, do you think that they took on any of your feedback, made any, in your opinion, did they make any changes, or you know, was it successful, or obviously you've got to a point now where you're representing against, or raising concerns, I should say?
No, look, I think we made ourselves pretty clear after that initial meeting when they came back to us with, I guess, their thoughts as they'd further developed. And we communicated, I guess, our concerns with what they were putting forward. And then when we saw the plans, we couldn't really see anything had been accommodated adequately at all.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Barakis and Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for making the deputation and for the chat earlier today. Now, just on that, I think one of the more, in my view, the more serious concerns of this in regards to the school would be the privacy issue. I think would be the clear standout as far as the impact that this could have on the school. If that was something that could be designed, or a solution could be designed around, would you be more amenable to the development going up, or is this something that you're just out and out not in favour of? Noting, I suppose, the what's been reported by the council staff.
Yeah, look, I'm sure there could be some design features built in which could help reduce the overlooking, but I don't know, looking at the size of the building, it's hard to sort of imagine just how that privacy would be protected no matter what you did, unless they were completely opaque walls. I mean, given the height, that a lot of the school would be able to be looked into for quite a distance, given that height. And yeah, I just can't really see how that could be alleviated, that privacy concern. But yeah, seeing that modelling before too with the light, I mean, that is a major impact on the school. And in a climate such as we have here, where, you know, yes, we get these beautiful winter days, our outside spaces are going to be very difficult to use because of the shadow that will be cast over the school for such long periods of the day. And
just one more, just bouncing off or following on from what Councillor Coates was asking. When you were provided with the plans, I think, was it either early this year or the end of last year, did you provide feedback at that point, or did you provide feedback and then they hadn't taken it on board, or what was the process there once you were provided with the plans?
We had a meeting with their representative down here and the architect, and yeah, that was sort of an opportunity to, I guess, look at it.
That was after you'd been provided with the plans.
Yeah, and they presented the plans to us. So no, we haven't done much since then. We haven't had the opportunity to do that. So they,
Councillor Harvey? Oh, sorry.
no, they intended to lodge shortly after our meeting, so it was very difficult to really incorporate any feedback if we'd been able to provide it, but we weren't really given the opportunity, I would say.
Right, thank you. I'm sure that's some questions for the developers as well.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Now, look, my questions have been answered. It was with regard to engagement by the proponents, and that's been answered clearly. Thank you.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up question then with regards to the presentation, Doctor. Thank you so much. Now, would you, if we were to defer this, would you be prepared to discuss this further with the applicants?
In terms of making adjustments to the proposed?
Yes.
Potentially, but it's difficult to see, given the height and the bulk of it, just how much they be prepared to, I guess, give. We're certainly not opposed to development on that site, but I just think it needs to be sympathetic to what surrounds it, which is a girls' school, and some areas which are very long-standing sacred areas to our, and important areas to our school community.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Dr. Forsyth. We'll now move to Mr. Stefan Vogel. Stefan, you have 5 minutes, and if you can address some of the concerns that you've raised in your representation, which may be different from Dr. Forsyth's.
Yeah, hello everyone. Well, basically the Balkan height has been already in many ways addressed in this. There are a lot of things in the report which I can't really comprehend in many ways. One of the minor things is basically that the application doesn't have any environmental assessment report. Basically, the site is a former gas station. There has been some remediation work done. There's nothing said really in regard of environmental assessment, the risk to the site that the site poses to the residents of Hobart during construction. If I understand it correctly, basically in Launceston, there's currently an appeal for a hotel going through, and one of the appeal reasons is, among others, the lack of environmental assessment. The other point which I want to raise is that the building is in such a height and at a location on the Macquarie Ridge, basically, which blocks the wind flow in the area, and that has immense implication on wind tunnel effects and downdraft, which comes from the building and the impact on the street. And while other places, basically proposals like the Welcome Stranger site, which is more in a valley, not on the ridge, had some wind assessment done, this proposal again lacks this completely. And I just want to remind everyone on the incident next to the Vodafone building from 2016, where a brick wall from the Brackman shop collapsed due to a wind event. And at the same time, basically, during the same event, as far as I understood it, basically, most of the windows in the top floor of that building actually went out as well. So wind in that location is certainly basically a major point which needs to be addressed prior to any approval. And saying that, if the wind assessment is not done, basically, that creates a huge liability for the Hobart City Council if basically an event happens in the future. The main concern which I'm raising is basically about the impact of traffic. There was a traffic report filed. There's a lot of data in it. the main part is basically any car which wants to enter the property will have to use the right-hand lane. It will have to slow down. It will have to yield for pedestrians or bicycles or anything which is in the crossing the entrance to the property. So during peak hours, that basically means one of the 3 lines is regularly shut down to stop, and that's according to their own calculations, will be at least every other traffic light cycle. The data which they provided is basically the traffic in the right-hand lane is 765 cars in the morning and 682 hours. The regular speed is 50 to 55 Ks. And the correct, if I recall it correctly, the cross traffic limit is about 1,000 cars. What will reducing the traffic flow on the right-hand side mean? It slows down and stops the traffic in that line completely. That's traffic which otherwise would be flowing at 55 to 60 kilometers an hour. This basically means that all the traffic on Macquarie Street has to move onto 2 lanes, and that exceeds certainly the cross traffic limit of 1,000 cars.
Would you like to summarize, Mr. Fogel?
Yeah. Yeah, so cars will attempt to change lanes, increase basically accident risk, etc. There are other issues along that line with the way they produce basically the parking, the view of line, that doesn't include, considers parking cars at all. So the last point which I want to raise is because of the height and the adjacent military installation of the barracks. I'm not sure whether anyone has considered in a way what security risk may have to operation on the barracks itself. Barracks is probably low security, but what does the impact is on helicopter traffic in and out of the barracks? Are there any documents in that regard? Has there been any consultation done? So overall, I do ask the council basically to reject this proposal. There are much better solutions to improving a shortage in our accommodation in Hobart, and which wouldn't create so many problems, which everyone across Hobart will.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Fogel. I think your time is up. So I'll and I'm conscious of time, so thanks. Are there any questions from any of the elected members? I just have a question. So you're talking about the wind disturbance and the concerns about what sort of impact there might be, because
Yes.
it's quite a difficult one to consider under the planning scheme. But that's your concern.
It's a concern in regard of the safety of residents on the street and people around, especially like collegiate college. What does that impact on their building, on their stability of building? The example which I point out is basically the collapse of the brick wall next to the Vodafone building, and also if there's a significant downdraft during the gust event, basically it could, for example, throw a pram onto the traffic, blow it just right off the pedestrian walkway into the traffic.
All right. Thanks very much for your deputation. I now move to Mr. Brian Corr. Mr. Corr, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. We note the minutes of the Urban Design Advisory Panel that were included at the end of the report to Council. The panel was disappointed that no design statement had been provided, as well as no shadow diagrams showing the overshadowing impacts on the adjacent school and properties. The panel was profoundly concerned about the nature of the proposal, its potential impact on the amenity of the adjacent school, and its scant regard for the adjacent heritage buildings and the overall streetscape, townscape qualities of the area. The panel agreed that this development is completely inappropriate for this site, noting that a number of the zone purpose statements, desired future character statements and objectives, and development standards had not been met. The proponent's urban analysis of the surrounding area failed, in the opinion of the panel, to give a true reflection of the actual urban context for the development site. The urban character of the school block is in fact defined predominantly by low-scale buildings, heritage-listed properties, places of historic interest and value, and landscaped open spaces with mature trees. Office buildings and apartment buildings nearby are modest in scale. It is largely an educational precinct with considerable heritage value, cultural worth, and amenity. The proposal's height and overshadowing will result in an intrusive and dominant building with a negative contribution to the Macquarie Street streetscape and broader townscape. Impacts on the surrounding townscape from Upper Macquarie Street, Barrack Street, Davy Street, the Anglesey Barracks precinct, and the adjacent park, including views to Mount Wellington, will be severe. Concerns were raised with the design of some of the apartments with regards to the adequacy of natural ventilation and daylight. The lack of setback from side and rear boundaries was also noted by the panel. This would not comply with the acceptable solutions coming into force on the 19th of November. Finally, the panel drew to the attention of council the fact that had the city's officers' recommendations following the work undertaken by Lee Woolley, if they had been progressed to a positive conclusion, this proposal could have had a more relevant and appropriate level of consideration. Now that's a pretty damning evaluation by the city's own urban design advisory panel. And reading the officer's report, we note that there are a number of discretions requested by council to do with things like contamination, traffic, layout of parking areas, stormwater drainage, etc. Also, a number of the zone purpose statements, desired future character statements and objectives, and development standards have not been met. This is not an appropriate development for this area. It severely damages the heritage, the streetscape, and the views of the mountain. 617 concerned citizens urge you to refuse, with not even one in favor. So we ask you to say no. But I'd like to just close by pointing out that in the panels, that's the Urban Design Advisory Panel's minutes, they use words like disappointed, profoundly concerned, scant regard, completely inappropriate for this site, failed, intrusive and dominant building, negative contribution, severe, concerns, lack of setback, and Lee Woolley. The minutes do not contain even one item that is good about this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corr. We have a question from Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple. Just in regard, Mr. Corr, to the UDAP report that you referred to, the terribly damning report. Just drawing your attention to one of the paragraphs, it does say that the panel notes that the application had been designed in a manner calculated to meet the acceptable solutions, and as a consequence, the panel recognises that in accordance with its terms of reference, there's very little opportunity for it to provide advice in regards to compliance. So you are aware that even though the UDAP wasn't happy with the development, they do at least acknowledge that it doesn't meet the planning scheme requirements.
They noted that fact.
Yes.
Not as a good point, just as a fact.
So it is a fact that it does in the views of UDAP meet the criteria of the planning scheme.
There are discretions.
Okay, but even the UDAP, I'm just want to get this correct. It is then a fact that UDAP has admitted, whether they like it or not, that this doesn't meet the planning scheme requirements. Yes or no?
Well,
I think you've made your point, Alderman Barakis.
They don't say, well, they don't say yes or no to this development.
That's not their job to say yes or no to this development. But
I don't think we'll have any further debate. It's
Sorry,
just
Laura.
a question and answer. Thanks, Mr. Corr. Are there any other questions of Mr. Corr? Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Core. I now hand over to Mr. Chris Merridew. So if you can take yourself off mute, Chris, and you have 5 minutes to address the committee, and hopefully with other issues that might not have already been touched upon.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Yes, the heritage issues have been touched upon, and we understand from the previous witnesses given that the heritage is a major part, and there are many heritage buildings around this site. Now, in my days on the National Trust, we were terribly proud that on exit polls, 68% of the visitors to Tasmania came to see the built heritage. And that's probably a higher figure these days because family history, convicts, all those sort of things are bringing people to Hobart. Hobart has a special point in history and in heritage that is not as well found anywhere in Australia. And we must not only be proud of it, but we must protect it. And this site is in the middle of what I refer to as a major boulevard, which starts really at South Hobart. If you look at the wonderful little weatherboard residences up there near the beginning of near St John's Hospital, right the way through Macquarie Street, past the Town Hall, right to the oldest building in the state, the museum. And that is mirrored on the other side of Macquarie Street, even in the opposite to where the development site is. There's heritage all around the site. So I think anything that is derogative to the heritage is a very dangerous aspect for this council to consider. I'll bring you back to 70 years ago when there was a plan approved by a council to demolish all those dreadful rabbit warren heritage buildings in Franklin, in Salamanca Place. Thank goodness the public, I don't know whether there were 618 or what it was, but there was a huge public outcry against such a wrong thing to do. We would have had best 1964 yellow brick buildings, as we see in the Museum Ag extension. And that was what happened when the public stood strongly against a council decision. I don't know whether it was actually happened or whether it was likely, but it was a hugely involved thing to the public. So this stands in a similar issue. It's a yes, as we've just heard from Alderman Barakis, it appears to fit within the frames of either being whatever the terms are used for those two frames, but it doesn't fit in an appropriate use for such a site or appropriate building, as we have heard from the headmaster of Hutchins School, of Collegiate. Now, new material to do with car parking. Yes, as Mr. Vogel said, it is an 840 vehicles per hour movement in Macquarie Street. And the developers have proposed a drop-off centre on one of the lower floors of 2 underground car parks. Now, from what I can remember of the plans, they were drive nose into car parks. Mum presumably gets out with the child, carries it across to a lift, goes up, hands over the child and returns to the vehicle, at which stage the parent is now reversing their vehicle out of a parallel car parking structure, and SUVs going backwards, and children has a very sad accident record here in Australia. It's not a good design, and I commend the developer for using underground car parks, but there is a far better design. That will only take 5 cars. It's about a 10-minute cycle, so their plans say. So that's 50 cars per hour, 50 car movements in, 50 car movements out. Sorry, not 50, it's far less than that. So that car parking arrangement is pretty unsatisfactory and it's dangerous. There will be a situation where there's a queue in there and the mums will opt to park in Macquarie Street, somewhere probably outside Collegiate or possibly outside the centre. The only way to get the child out is to open the back left-hand door into the traffic. Mum and the child are standing in the traffic, which, as we understand, are proceeding at 800 vehicles per hour past there. Not a good situation at all. In fact, incredibly dangerous. I noticed that the Department of Infrastructure, who control Macquarie and Davies Streets, point out the fact that the traffic arrangements there are constantly under review, and that curbside parking may not always be an available matter of the future, certainly in...
30 seconds, Chair.
So,
if you'd like to summarise, Mr. Merridew, thanks.
yes. So I would recommend that the committee do not approve the development for those reasons I've added to the other matters that have been debated this afternoon. And it is just not an appropriate building for all the reasons that you've heard to date. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of Mr. Merridew? Mr. Merridew, I just have a question, and I did cut you off because we were running out of time. But so you're saying that the cars come in, then have to drop off their child, then have to reverse and then turn to get out. So make a turn rather than specifically just dropping off, say in the front of the building. Just and I'll get more clarification from the applicant in a moment.
The current plan is that there's a car park on the lower floor. You drive off Macquarie Street, across the footpath, down underneath, turn left and forward into one of the parking spaces. To get out, you have to then reverse out, drive back up the ramp that you've just come down and come back out onto Macquarie Street, where you have no sight lines onto the footpath. Pedestrians walking down the footpath will be invisible to you until you've got at least the windscreen out onto the cross onto the footpath. If they had an exit on the bottom side of the building, exit only on the
so it's the only
that would improve it. But the sight lines from this building exiting for motorists are deplorable. If you go back to if you go down Macquarie Street to 156, which is the building with the pod on the top, or to the Lands Department building, or to the Tasmanian Government Insurance buildings, those three towers built opposite Victoria Street in the 70s, they all have underground car parks of some sort, and they all have exits onto the street. Now, all those three buildings are set back from footpath.
I see your point, and I see, the ingress and egress are from the same spot. Yeah, I see your point. There's not a second crossway. Okay, are there any other questions of Mr. Merridew? If not, I thank everybody for putting in, doing their deputations, and I now ask the architects Will Harkness and Scott Verdot from Jaws Architects to make some sort of response to the concerns raised in these deputations, and there may be questions from the committee as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Sorry, just unmuting. Hi, I'm Will Harkness, and this is Scott Verdot. I'm the directors at Jaws. I suppose to give a quick summation, the proposal is for an apartment building within the central business area. It's outside of heritage precinct. Currently, the site is a vacant, somewhat derelict, fenced-off site. The proposal is for 40 apartments and some commercial tenancies, including a childcare facility. There is 2 levels of underground car parking, and there are 9 stories all up. The maximum height of the building is 30 metres, which is within the acceptable solution. It's entirely within the acceptable envelope. It does step down to 20 metres for the first 15 metres of the site. And then I suppose to talk to some of one of the key issues that's been raised is the concerns regarding overlooking. So I thought it's worth talking to that point. We've certainly been mindful of that. Actually, is it possible for me to share my screen, Madam Chair?
Craig, is that possible?
It is possible, but we don't usually allow it. But
don't have. Has everyone got plans they can look at in front of them? Or okay, So I kind of just marked up a plan to try and make it a bit clearer, but I can just describe it if it's not appropriate.
Craig, Craig, it would be quite useful to see those plans, I think, if we can share Mr. Harkness' screen.
I've changed the permissions. You can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, just let me screen share. Where must share? Where is it? That one there. Sorry, one moment. There we go, I think. Can everyone see that plan? Yeah. So this is what I call a typical floor plan. It represents levels 3 to 5. And what we've done here is I've drawn red on these walls that are solid and do not have, all the bits that are drawn red solid have no windows in them. And this is something from the outset of the project, we've been very mindful of its proximity to the school and mindful of privacy and overlooking. And then where I've shown these blue arrows, sort of showing how we're controlling views and where you can look out from. So to this south-eastern sort of edge and along this western side here, you can see we've stepped back considerably from the envelope of the site. And then we've also been very mindful looking back here to essentially to have no windows in the apartments. So views, in an apartment like this are looking out this way. We have these slots cut in a number of instances where to allow light into a bedroom, but to control overlooking. We use devices such as screening louvers, which control the direction or only allow oblique views. And then in a few instances, we use high-level windows, which are typically in planning requirements, are windows above 1700 from finished floor level, so that essentially the windows for light and you're not able to look down. So yeah, that's something from the outset we've been mindful of. As it was mentioned, we did arrange with the planner and myself to go and meet a year ago with the principal, and I think it was the COO of the school.
Thanks, David. I think we'll continue. So if you can probably speak for another three or so minutes, if you can make as many points as possible, then we'll open it to questions.
Sure. And so just quickly, we were keen to engage with the school and to get their feedback on, I suppose, the approach we'd taken. We realised, that it's something that they're probably not going to be happy about, but at the same time, we're keen to offer them the opportunity to comment and contribute. And we were, particularly mindful, and I'll bring up an elevation if I can. Can everyone see that elevation? Okay, yep. So, that shows, for instance, where we do have windows, that they're all these slot windows are high level. So the dash lines represent the floor level, and all those windows are, we've nominally said 1700 above floor level. And then if we were to look at the rear elevation facing the school, because we were very mindful of not having windows, we ended up with large areas of facade, and we were keen to get input from the school in terms of how they might like to see those facades treated, both from a materiality, or even was it something that they'd like to, are there any art projects, or, it's a detailed thing, but just wanted to open up that line of communication. What we didn't, we have sent them the plans, as Dr. Forsyth mentioned. We've sort of said that our doors are open in terms of listening to any thoughts they've had, but we haven't heard anything from them. And, that's okay, but I guess just wanted to explain that. In terms of, our view is that it's within the acceptable height. It's within the core business area. It's outside of the heritage zone where it's difficult to get sites like this, an empty site that's of reasonable size to allow a development to be built. And, the other side of the coin to a project like this is that it's about controlling urban sprawl and, sea of houses spreading outside of cities. So I guess that's the other consideration, for us when looking at a project like this. We've incorporated materials that we feel reference local heritage materials in terms of red brick at a facade level. We've used a colonnade approach at the facade to kind of reference the street pattern of the existing smaller buildings along Macquarie Street. And then we have a kind of lower podium that then steps back at the 20-metre height. Look, I suppose that's all I'd really say, but very happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. And Alderman Barakis has put his hand up straight away. So over to you, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation. I think I did have a few questions lined up about the privacy, because I did think that was one of the sort of more serious of the concerns. And just going off what you presented to us just then, would it be safe to say that it'd be difficult to, if I was a resident in one of those apartments, that it'd be difficult for me to look down into the school and see what was going on in the school? I suppose that's ultimately the important thing here.
Generally, yeah. I mean, we've been very mindful of that. I'd say for the majority of apartments, there's almost, no way to look. For a number, they're, high-level windows. Of course, they can stand up on something and look down, if they're so inclined. But I suppose we can't entirely control society, and if they're willing to go that far, they could probably do it another way anyway. But we've, within reason, at the same time, we need to provide amenity to apartments. So we've certainly, in every way we can along the relevant facades, tried to make it difficult to overlook. So either no windows overlooking, or a high level, or a window that's controlled so that you can only have views in another direction, sort of oblique views.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you for that. Just a couple more quick ones. I suppose just to that point, would it be, and I don't know, it's obviously not, I don't think it's anything we can condition, so this is more just, I suppose, conversational at this point, but as far as addressing the, obviously the minority of people that might seek to look into a girls' school, and we don't, the unsavoury types, to have frosted windows on those ones that are elevated up, because I wouldn't expect that people are going to be looking through them for a view anyway.
So, yeah, that's certainly something we could incorporate, and it could be conditioned. We could definitely do a treatment that meant it was just light and there was no, no sort of vision out, so to speak.
Yeah, look, thank you. That's just something that just a thought that arose from that. But just finally, and it was a sort of comment that's come up a few times so far in the representation, so I thought I'd give you an opportunity just to respond to it. The traffic and the ingress and egress from the car park, and just responding to some of those comments that were made about how it's the perceived difficulties of managing that, and just noting obviously the planning officer's reports, but how would you respond to the comments that have been made?
Well, look, I mean, I should start with, I'm not a traffic engineer, and we did engage a traffic engineer to consult on this, and he's written a report that was part of the application. My understanding is that with the given number of apartments, which is 40, which in many ways isn't a huge number, and the amount of traffic movements that have been calculated that would come out of that, the impact is not huge in terms of the number of times cars will be slowing down traffic to pull into that lane. Of course, it still has an impact, but my understanding is that it's not a huge impact. And then in terms of the childcare centre, our approach, the way it would work is that someone pulls in, goes down a ramp to the basement. There's a number of spots allocated for the childcare, which from memory is 10. and yeah, they park and go into the lift core and drop their child off and then back, and yeah, they reverse out. But I mean, you do that out of any car park. I do that
Yep.
when I
Thank you. And I think there are 5, not 10. So, but I'll hand over to Alderman Briscoe, just in the interests of fairness.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation. I'm looking at figure 8 and figure 7 on page 40 of the report. I wonder, as a design team, although you might have stuck to the bare black letter law of 20 and 30 metres, have you considered being a good neighbour and perhaps having higher and more bigger apartments, higher value, but keep the height down to respect the heritage nature of that area?
Look, we certainly looked at a number of scenarios with our clients. You know, the difficulty is that we're working to a planning scheme, and look, I understand your point of, we can sort of say, well, in theory, you know, you don't have to build to that level. I suppose the commercial reality that we have to work within is that you know, a developer does look to, you know, if they're buying a site, they're looking to build a certain amount of apartments, and they're looking to do that well, but at the same time, it's got to financially work to enable these projects to be built.
Thank you for that. A supplementary question. You and your clients obviously think there's a market for small one-bedroom bed sits?
Well, we've got a mix of sized apartments, and there's certainly within the mix there's some of those, and yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, certainly for students.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. My question relates to the sustainability that you mentioned earlier and preventing urban sprawl. So I'd also like to get your view on sustainability with regard to health and the impacts of overshadowing, which I understand that this building will create, even though it's not, it doesn't matter with regard to the planning scheme, but just, you mentioned sustainability. So I'd like your views on sustainability and the impacts of overshadowing on the student population next door.
I mean, that's a bit of a grey idea. I don't know the science of, you know, what the impacts of overshadowing will be on the students next door, but there's already quite a bit of overshadowing, and I suppose what's not picked up in that model is the overshadowing caused by trees, which are of course somewhat ephemeral given the, you know, seasons. But look, I can't really speak to the science of health in terms of overshadowing. I would think people are still going to get enough vitamin D, but again, I'm not sure what exactly to say to that.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
I have a few questions. Just in relation to apartments 7, 14, 32 and 36. So they're on, if you're looking at the building from Macquarie Street on the right-hand side, the balconies look like there's not much amelioration of overlooking. Could you just perhaps explain how that's going to be mitigated?
So I'm looking at, say, apartment 7. Is that an appropriate apartment to talk to?
Yeah, 7, 14, 32, 36. Yep.
So that apartment has, the balcony has a solid wall that extends out all the way along the boundary edge. So you can't look directly towards a school. Your views are controlled towards Macquarie Street. Of course, you can see somewhat to the left, but you're really just looking at obliquely at the facade of a building rather than into a building or into its grounds.
And perhaps perhaps just in the interest of time, so if you go to apartment 36, you have a balcony directly overlooking from that top floor, or close to top floor anyway.
The balcony, yeah, the balcony on the top floor.
Mm.
Yeah, so it has a setback from a planter that I guess prevents you from being able to look right over the edge. So you sort of set back a metre, which certainly limits your views downwards. And then given it's at the height it's at, you're really going to be looking at a roof.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, maybe the next level down, but that's okay. I think you've covered some of those things. I want to get back to the parking and traffic issue. How do you think the report responds? And I know you're not traffic engineers, but obviously you're here representing the client. How do you think the traffic impact would affect pedestrians using the Macquarie Street footpath?
You mean in terms of danger, or just in terms of interrupting them walking, or?
As far as safety goes in relation to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as with any crossover, when a car's pulling out across a footpath, the car needs to yield for pedestrians and be aware of that, and likewise pedestrians need to always be looking out when they cross somewhere that cars are coming over. There is an area hatched for oblique views as pedestrians are potentially walking in front of cars. The colonnade area along to the right allows views quite some distance along that walkway for both parties. Whereas sort of from a car's point of view, look to the left, it's obviously they've got an existing wall that somewhat limits, so that but there still is a hatch zone we show. And there's potential that there could be mirrors to assist with that, but I mean, I don't think it's particularly any different than any situation where there's a crossover over a footpath.
Okay, all right, thanks. And just in relation to some of the points raised, protection around the construction phase and impacts on other buildings. Obviously, there's a condition relating to this. Yeah. And the other point, the final point that I'll make, Mr. Vogel in his deputation provided suggestions that the impact of the wind and downdraft might have some sort of impact. What's your feeling about that?
In terms of from a safety structural perspective, this is something that would certainly be addressed as the building is designed in conjunction with structural engineers. So, and considerations about height and wind scenarios all come into that in terms of the construction. In terms of the wind tunnel effect, I would say that given the height of the building and the articulation within the facade and the setback and the step back at the 20-metre height, this wouldn't be a significant issue because it's essentially not a very tall building. I mean, I understand within context it is, but when we're talking about towers that in major Australian cities causing wind tunnels, it's not a tall building in that scenario.
Okay, sorry, one more question just in relation. I think Councillor Dutta raised the issue of deferral. Would you consider a deferral if committee were to do that? We have obviously the expiry date tomorrow. Would you look to extend that expiry date?
Yeah, we can't really speak on behalf of the client in this instance, but we can definitely put that forward to them.
We can check, but yeah, I think we can't really answer that right now. Sorry.
We've got to make a decision tonight, so we'd need an answer if we were to defer that. So you might need to speak to your client in the next 5 or so minutes.
Okay, we can do that.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll now open the item for discussion. And just so that we're not too rushed, we have until 5:30 that when we have to start the council meeting. So please spend time and consideration with this. It's pretty rushed as it is. So I'll open the item for discussion. Any questions? Alderman Barakis.
Well, I do have some questions, but just to kick the discussion off, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendations.
Thank you.
Look, I do have some questions of the director. Just to confirm in regard, just go through all the issues that we have in front of us that have been raised. The height and mass of the building is within the acceptable solutions. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Chair. That's correct.
Thank you. And also, like, I think it was one of the more serious of the concerns raised, which is the privacy issue. That doesn't seem to be a relevant an applicable discretion at the moment, is it?
Again, through you, Chair, that's correct. It's not triggered at all under the scheme.
Thank you. And look, I might even have some more questions afterwards, but I suppose this comes down to, it looks like a pretty, what would you say, clear feedback from the officers in regards to whether or not this item meets the requirements of the planning scheme. We've got the obviously UDAP had even reluctantly, they weren't happy with it, but they said that even in their view it didn't meet the criteria of the planning scheme. If this was to end up if we were to refuse this and this was to end up an appeal, would we be, I suppose, what would our chances be in defending a refusal against this an appeal?
Mr. Noy.
Yes, again through you, Chair. Look, I think in terms of success before the tribunal, it's not something that I like to comment too much on. But in this case, clearly there are limited grounds for refusal based on the discretions that we have before us. So I think the chances of success before a tribunal with this application if council were to refuse it would be remote.
Thank you for that, and I'll pass on in a second. I thought, just given the discussion with the applicants, that the idea of having those windows, the raised windows, frosted, just to prevent any sort of peeping toms or whatever you want to call it, and really ensuring that privacy. My understanding is we can only provide it as advice, but I might move the motion with that advice that we request that they consider frosting those windows just for the sake of privacy. So I'll leave it there for the moment, but I might have some more questions.
Good. So you're putting that amendment as it might be. Okay, thank you. Alderman Brisk.
Could I just jump? Sorry, just to quickly answer your question, Madam Chair. Our clients have said that they would not accept a deferral.
Right, I didn't think so, but thank you. I thought I'd ask.
Thank you. Cheers.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Look, you know, I don't want to reflect on the beauty or not of this development, because I have a view of it. Although I think that the design panel, I share the design panel's views. So I'll foreshadow a motion for refusal on the grounds that we have, I believe Mr. Noy has got the grounds of refusal document for us, which he'll share, I'm sure, if it gets to that stage. We've got to be very careful that this part of town, we've got important heritage buildings. We have got a legal advice, which I've just read, which is not publicly available. And because it's not publicly available, because it's on the under confidential note. I can't actually refer to it, but like all legal advice, there's always alternate views, and that's why we have lawyers of opposing sides. And I would disagree with the advice that we've got. I think we have a responsibility to consider the heritage of this area. It's a very, very important. Some of the buildings close by are 1830s, 1840s buildings. I think there's one even earlier than that. This will change the nature of this area dramatically. And there is developments there that would work. And I think it was referred to me today in the Australian at the weekend that high-end apartments are selling in Sydney, but the low end, the single bedroom, the bed sits and not, and a 5-story building there would be very, very profitable, I'm sure, for the applicant. Now, that's not a planning consideration, but I think that we've got to make a statement here. I have described this as the Empress Towers of this part of Macquarie Street. If we allow this, we are destroying things that, as Mr. Menadue has said to us, that people come to Hobart for the low scale of the city. And we have a modern apartment that wouldn't fit out of place in parts of Melbourne and Sydney, but it is out of place for a sense of place in Hobart. So I hope the committee supports, if we do get to the stage of considering my foreshadowed motion for refusal. We can't defer, because if we defer, they'll automatically get their approval, because the time runs out. Isn't it tomorrow? The time runs out. We've just heard from the applicant that they're not willing to give us a definitive, time to consider it in more detail. So it may have to be determined eventually at the planning tribunal, but I think there are very important issues to consider. As other people in the community have said, this is a once in a 100-year ability to ruin our city in this area. So I think we've got to take the bull by the horns and say, let's refuse it with good conditions. It appears that we can't refuse it on height because that discretion is not allowed. If we had the Woolly / planning officer's recommendation for a year or so ago, we could refuse it because it was 15-metre limit there in that thing. So I think we've got to make a statement for the people of Hobart that we do not want a high rise of this nature in this area of our city. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. Councillor Sherlock, then Councillor Dutta.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify one of the, in the report, it was talking about one of the discretions that we had with reference to the contamination reports. Is that correct?
Mr. Noy?
Clarify the meaning of that for me. Thanks, Mr. Director.
Yes, through you, Chair, there is a discretion. There was a requirement that a report be provided in a certain format that wasn't necessarily done in the correct format. So it's a somewhat of a technical discretion. The EPA does not consider the site to be contaminated at this point in time, and we believe that and we've included a condition requiring the necessary report be provided in the correct form as a condition. So we think that issue can be resolved by way of condition.
Thank you very much. So just to reiterate once again, the report has not been provided, and there is also no environmental assessment report at present, and that is within one of our discretions as councillors to say that report, but you have conditioned it should it go ahead. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just endorse the comments and the points made by Alderman Briscoe. And I just want to share 5 points. Firstly, it is my view that when I read the report and all the facts presented to us, that it fails because of the height, when you consider it, that the building is within the 15 meter of the Macquarie Street frontage. So that legal opinion is a valid one. However, as Alderman Briscoe has said, it's only a matter of opinion from one particular lawyer. Point number two, I think it also fails to satisfy the fact that it's been, the land is not suitable for the intended use because there isn't the environmental assessment that has been provided to us. Thirdly, I think it also fails because it does not establish the excavation, that it will not affect and have an impact on the health of the people. If you look at the clause, it says there's a risk, but the evidence that is provided to us, it says low risk, but the clause does not say low risk, but risk itself. Fourthly, I think it also fails because of the design with regards to vehicle access, etc. And point number five, I think it also fails to satisfy clause 675 A1 and P1 as well, because of the layout of the parking access, etc. The study that was done was 2018. The fact that things have changed over the 2 years quite dramatically, the evidence does not support it for me. Thank you.
So, Councillor Dutta and Alderman Briscoe, are you? Do you have the same reasons for refusal? Alderman Briscoe, do those reasons line up with yours?
Well, I think we'll have to just look at the wording that's been provided, will be provided by the director, but we can incorporate the ones that Councillor Dutt has mentioned. I still think that we could probably incorporate that it doesn't fit the height and it affects the amenity of surrounding buildings, etc. But I think until we get to my motion, it may not get there. I think we'll consider it then. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Chair. I'll start by reiterating what the Urban Design Advisory Panel said, and we've got to keep in mind who was on that panel, and it is a panel of experts in planning and architecture. And one of their comments was, the panel agreed that the proposal is completely inappropriate for this site, even though it may be argued successfully that it complies with the current provisions of the planning scheme. So that for me is really, really telling. So a group of peers to the architects who are here tonight and the planners who put this proposal together completely disagree with what's been brought to us. And I guess that leaves me with a great deal of disappointment with the developers who put these sort of proposals to council. And it disappoints me that we don't have a certainty, which we would have had if we had the Woolly report and recommendations acknowledged in the planning scheme. So in all good conscience, I really can't support this tonight, and I'll be supporting the recommendation for refusal. And it may be that this will be decided by a planning tribunal, but at least I'll be able to sleep easy that I didn't support a completely inappropriate development that would have a huge impact on its neighbours, that is not within the spirit of what we want to do within the planning scheme, and is not within the community expectations of how Hobart should be developing into the future. And when it comes to the argument that we're trying to prevent urban sprawl, and this is about sustainability, yes, I do see the relevance of that, but putting the pressure on Hobart by going, by trying to push inappropriate buildings in the inappropriate locations doesn't help with sustainability. If anything, it creates an anxiety within a community. And we can see that because we've had 618 representations. Even though some of them or most of them were a form letter, people don't have the time necessarily to put together their own individual representation. So they do appreciate the work that organisations who can speak on their behalf do. So Hobart Not High Rise was, I think, able to coordinate something, but those 618 people are all individuals who all think that this is a very inappropriate development. So I acknowledge the representations and the the concern that those people who submitted those representations have for this. So like I said, I won't be supporting a recommendation for approval, but I will be supporting a recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Coates.
Look, thank you, Chair. I guess I've got a preliminary question first through you, Chair, to the Director. Director, and then I guess my comments towards this application, but Director, if we were to refuse this, and that's obviously been put forward, and it did go to the appeals tribunal and that the case was lost, would Hobart ratepayers then be up for obviously our cost, but also the, in all likelihood, the cost of the, as losing party would have to bear their costs as well?
Look, not necessarily. It would depend on whether we were able to provide qualified advice in support of the council's position, and we'd need to establish whether we could get, for example, a planner to support, or other experts in their respective fields to support the position of council, as to whether they could provide a reasonable, rational argument in support of it, as to whether costs would necessarily be awarded against council if their position was lost in the appeal tribunal. So it depends.
Thank you, Director. Yeah, look, I guess thank you to all the people for putting in favour of this, and I mean, look, my initial thoughts are it's an ugly shoebox in the sky, and I agree with a lot of the comments that people have been making about this. To my mind, it's not necessarily a failure of this developer; it's a failure of the City of Hobart's planning, where people are so desperate for a house that no one's competing on quality anymore, and frankly, to be able to build and successfully sell, and I suspect this will sell out before it's even built. Shoeboxes is a wake-up call, hopefully, to all of us. But look, acknowledging the comments that if we do get appropriate advice, it might be defensible. I suspect that if we were able to get advice to that effect, we would have it before us. And look, I'm always very loath to put ratepayers on the hook for any money. And look, I hope in some senses this doesn't go ahead, but I find myself having to go on the advice as we've got it in front of us. And that is that there's no legitimate planning reason for us to knock this back. And if we were to do it, it would appear that it has a very, very high likelihood of success at the tribunal. So, look, given that, unfortunately, I might find myself having to vote in favour of this, albeit reluctantly.
You could have a bet each way, Councillor Coates. That's always possible. It wouldn't be the first time that people have done that. Thank you. Look, I have a couple of questions of you, Director. Just in relation to, obviously, this has been a very truncated time for both the public and us as the planning authority to consider the report, which came out on Friday. And clearly, we've approached the developer, and they have been reluctant to extend that. I think it's partly related to the planning scheme amendment that's going to come in relation to amenity of inner city residential apartments. Can you just explain to me, as far as the timeline goes, in relation to that? I mean, how would that be considered differently? Should we be considering this with the planning scheme amendments in place?
If the planning scheme amendments were in place, then we would be certainly considering them. Those, I suppose, residential amenity elements in the new provisions that will be coming in on the 19th of November. As to their performance against those, the officers haven't done an assessment, so I'm not in a position to comment on that. But yeah, certainly if those provisions were in, those the proposal would need to be assessed against them. So is that answer your question?
I think it does by default in a way. Thank you. So the Urban Design Advisory Panel has quite a number of concerns, and in some ways they're really not endorsing this as an application. Can you tell me exactly how much time, or when during the process the applicant went to the Urban Design Advisory Panel, and what sort of input was taken on board?
Yeah, look, well, certainly they went before the panel during the notification period. Now, I'm not sure, and maybe the applicant can advise whether there was a pre-consultation pre-consultation engagement with UDAP prior to that point. I don't believe so, but the applicant might correct me if I'm incorrect on that.
Mr. Harkness?
No, the first meeting with UDAP or presentation to UDAP was during the notification period. Yeah, you're right, Mr. Bond.
Okay, thank you. Look, I too have considerable concerns. I have spoken to a number of the representors whose contact details I could get hold of. Some, including some architects. So Mr. Bevan Rees was one of the representors, and he, as a leading architect in the city, is absolutely appalled, and is not the only one appalled in his profession with this application. So it is of major concern. I think some of the points that have been raised here really do stress the concern that there is, not only from over 600 representors, but more generally. I've spoken to other people. The phone has been running hot today in relation to this application. So I certainly will be supporting grounds for refusal. So I think we'll move to, because in the interests of time, and given this will go straight to committee, to council, I think we'll put Alderman Barakas's motion as it stands. So I'll go around the room. We'll start with you, Alderman Briscoe.
No.
Vote against. Councillor Harvey?
No.
Alderman Barakas?
Yes.
Councillor Dutta?
No.
Councillor Coates?
Yes.
And I vote no. So the motion is lost 4 votes to 2. I'll now go to Alderman Briscoe's motion for refusal. Have we got conditions?
Well, I wonder if I could ask Mr. Noy to put that up on our share screen.
Look, David Banks, you have them. Are you in a position to put them up?
Yeah, I have them, but I don't think Craig's got them.
Okay, I can, just bear with me. I might be able. I'm just wondering how to share. If I forward these to Craig, just bear with me. We need to.
I'm sorry, but we'll have to adjourn this meeting so that we can actually start the council meeting. So, so what do we need to do? So leave this meeting or keep it open, or?
If it just stands adjourned,
yep.
Then the Lord Mayor can open the council.
Okay.
And then the council can decide what it wishes to do, whether it wants to come back into the planning meeting or continue on with council.
Okay, all right. So can I have a motion for adjournment, please? Thanks, Councillor Dutta. Councillor Dutta, is there any dissent? No dissent. So I declare this meeting adjourned and hand over to you, Lord Mayor.
Deputy, we're actually in a committee meeting, so I think we've got to go into the full council meeting, don't we?
Yeah, you need to log out and then re-log in on the council meeting.
Okay, and what happens to those people who are listening in, Mr.
They can watch the council meeting, Chair, in about 2 or 3 minutes.